Hey, you're listening to the Worldwide Underground. My name is Gabriel Teodros. This is episode 4. Since the very beginning of this experiment in audio storytelling, I've been focused on artists who are using their voice right now to speak up for Palestine, for a ceasefire, and for the ultimate end of the apartheid state that exists over there. My guest today is a voice who's been on the scene, active, speaking up for justice ever since I first heard him in the late 90s. We get into some of that history as this is the 25-year anniversary of his debut film, Slam. And we talk a little bit about our shared history as well. I first met Saul Williams in 1999 at the Third Place Books in Lake Forest Park. Came to find out years later that that bookstore was just blocks away from Octavia E. Butler's house. I still remember the day so clearly. I had never seen this many black people in North Seattle in my life, maybe before or since. And I met a lot of really important people in my life that night at this event for Saul Williams, including my guy Rajni Eddins, who along with his mother Randy Eddins, founded a space in the Central District called the Poetry Experience. The PE was like this poetry circle that happened in Langston Hughes, right there in the basement, twice a month. It was where a lot of folks in our generation who, didn't have spaces to really perform our rhymes, we got together at the PE and we'll share new pieces twice a month. It's where so many of us really found our voice and cultivated our craft. I bring that up to say, Saul Williams was there the day I met Rajni, and my life has never been the same. Saul had that kind of impact on an entire generation of people who got stories like mine. So it felt like a real full circle moment having this conversation with Saul today. We talked about the film Slam, as this year marks its 25-year anniversary, but also the work that Saul was doing in protest of the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan 20 years ago, how that work still resonates today. Saul's commitment to speaking up for Palestine, and also his more recent work, Neptune Frost and the Martin Luther King Project, which shines a light on the ongoing genocide and the atrocities happening in the Congo, how all this is connected, and more. I really wanted to have a podcast where we could just nerd out about music and storytelling and shine a light on all the underheard stories, because it all matters. But this right here is what we do art for. If it's not to save lives, then why are any of us using our voices, right? This is a continuation of the work I was trying to do on KEXP, and it's a completely independent project. So I just want to thank everyone who's already subscribed over on the Substack. If this podcast is brand new to you, but you like what you hear and want to support it, tap in gabrielteodros.substack.com. It's the best way to support all the storytelling projects that we've got going on. With no further ado, let's get into this episode. The one and only, the legend, Saul Williams, right here, the Worldwide Underground. Let's get it. Hey, it's the Worldwide Underground. I am joined today by a legend, someone who I've known pretty much since I started in music, the one and only Saul Williams.
Hey man, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining. I wanted to go back in time because I feel like there's a lot of echoes of things that were happening, back in the late 90s, early 2000s that are still very relevant now. And I wanted to go back, if you don't mind, to ask you, do you remember when we first met?
Well, I believe that it must have been via Jonathan Moore or
It was before.
peace.
It was before that even.
It was before that even. So are you saying that we met at Youth Speaks or Brave New Voices?
Before, well, I
At
don't.
Bumbershoot?
Before that, it was a book. It was you were touring with the She
Oh,
book
wow.
in 1999,
So then
and
the
you,
answer is no. I
yeah,
don't remember. I do remember touring with that book, and that was just before. I mean, that was literally a few months before I came back to Seattle
right.
for Bumbershoot.
Yeah, and you came with the band and just killed it.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, I was there too. That night that you came with the book though in 1999, it was a really important night in my life, man, because it was 99. I had just moved back to Seattle from Las Vegas,
Hmm.
and your film Slam reached me when I was in high school, and and high school was a really hard time for me. There was a lot of like conflicts that were going on, and I don't want to get too much into it, but I do want to tell you that the scene in Slam where you are in the middle of the courtyard,
Yeah,
some people are trying to jump you and you just bust into a poem and it kind of like deads the conflict.
yeah.
I actually did that in life, inspired by your film, and you got me out of a couple like tight situations, man. So thank
Yeah,
you for
yeah,
that.
yeah.
You know,
I hear you,
um,
bro. That
yeah,
scene itself got me out of a tight situation because that scene is as real as it is, you know, performed. Because all of
wow.
the prisoners didn't know that we were shooting a film. Um,
Oh wow.
yeah, and we only had an hour to shoot that one scene, and the warden would only agree to releasing those 150 prisoners for 1 hour, and she didn't tell them we were shooting a film. So they only 16 prisoners knew that I was an actor. The 150 others did not know. They saw cameras following me and assumed that I was some snitch that had agreed to allow a news team to follow me and on my first day in prison. And
Mm.
so when some people saw the prisoners we were working with walking towards me as if they were about to jump me, a bunch of other people we were not working with followed them like, yeah, let's get this fool. And the poem worked.
Wow.
So yeah, I hear you.
That's ill. Huh. I didn't even think about the fact that, you were filming in a real prison at the time. Was there ever any contact with folks who were inside while you were filming
Of
after?
course.
Yeah. Did like
Of course. In fact,
what did people think about the film after? Like what was those conversations like?
well, let me tell you the story of two brothers who are in the film. Um, their names are Mamalou Stewart and Halim Flowers. And Mamalu, you'll definitely remember because Mamalu, who was 16 at the time when we shot
Mm.
Slam in DC jail, he was serving 75 to life. In fact, he was serving 2 life sentences. And at 16, he had been sentenced. And I had met him the day before. We ended up shooting a scene with him. I heard him rap. Like I entered a cipher with him and some other dudes who were, on lockdown there. And and I was so impressed with him that I begged the director, like, can we shoot a scene with him? And so the next morning,
Yes, I remember the
there's a
scene.
scene where
Yeah.
I'm put into my cell next to a guy who starts making a beat on the table and
Yeah.
rapping. And the camera pans back and forth between his cell and mine, and we kind of freestyle together. That dude is Mamalou Stewart.
Got
And
you.
2 years ago, because of the law that Obama changed when he was in office that said that it was now illegal to have charged juveniles with adult sentences via the Innocence Project, he was released. And so Mamalou Stewart is now free, along with another brother who you don't see so much in the film, but you see in the documentary that the director Mark Levin did called
Mm.
Thug Life, there in the same prison, called Halim Flowers. Mamalou is a rapper, and Halim is a visual artist. Halim Flowers. You can find them both on Instagram. They
Uh-huh.
both served 22 years
Wow.
locked up and just got out 2 years ago.
Wow.
And since this is the 25-year anniversary of Slam, Mamalu came with us to Sundance, where we celebrated it this past year, and saw the film on the big screen for the first time. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we had been in touch all along, so so yes, we have been in touch with brothers who were, in the film, who were locked up at that time. And the good news is that Mamalu Stewart and Helene Flowers are free and thriving as artists and people that now go back into the prisons to communicate with prisoners, and go speak to students, and are a part of, the criminal justice reform and abolitionist movements. So yes, I'm
That's
glad you asked
beautiful.
about them.
Nah, that's beautiful. And thank you for sharing that story. I actually was going to ask a question about the 25-year anniversary of Slam, because you shared a video of that event at Sundance that moved me to
Yeah,
tears. You know, that
the
video and
dude
what
sitting beside me is
is
Mamalu.
Mama Lou. Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember that,
yep,
but I was wondering because I saw him in the video and I couldn't place where he was in the video. So you just explained all of it.
yep.
Like, yeah,
That
yeah, that
the scene that he's in is my favorite part of the film Slam.
I
I
remember
remember
it
the
so
first time
clearly.
I saw the film. And
Yeah.
the first time I saw the film, I hadn't seen earlier edits. I only had one question, which was, did that scene make it?
Mm.
And when I saw that camera pan between me and him, I was like, I'm good.
Was it
I'm good.
completely improvised as well, that scene?
100%.
Whoo. Ew. Ew. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
You've been a part of so many films now. Like, how often is it that improvisation makes it onto the screen? Because it seems like that would be really rare.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean,
Mm,
in my mind, I haven't been a part of a lot of films, not as many as I
okay.
thought I would be a part of, because, I
Mm,
studied as an actor. I did, like, Slam was really like my thesis project when I was in graduate school for acting at NYU. Um, I did it right after, or I started it during my third year, my final year of my MFA. And my dream was to act. I had no interest in writing. I had no interest in writing poetry. I had no interest in making. I mean, I had done those things as a teenager. I didn't think that making music and poetry would actually carry me, perhaps even more than acting, because I had spent
mm,
my entire childhood acting and studying acting.
mhm.
Um, so I'm like, yeah, I've been able to act a little bit, but it's weird because acting is my first love, and I've spent way more time with poetry and music,
Right.
since Slam. But that's also because of choices, right? Because um, I've also not really been so interested in perpetuating, like, norms in terms of choices, in terms of jobs that come, but also because of the lack of the imagination of the industry, who would listen to someone who talks like me and be like, well, we need someone that's a little more hood. And I'm like, I'm from the hood. It's a lot of cats
Right.
like me, actually.
Yeah.
I understand you're looking for a caricature, but if you
Exactly.
want to, like, truly represent the hood, you might as well use me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, a product of as much as anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been interesting. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, yeah. I can only imagine, one of my biggest inspirations in storytelling in all forms is Haile Garima,
Boom.
talk who talks so much about, yeah, his struggles with Hollywood and making
Yeah.
films by black audiences for black audiences and all the challenges. And yeah, I can only imagine, brother.
Yeah.
Like,
It takes a lot. Haile Garima comes from,
hmm,
that kind of LA rebellion, that moment of
yeah,
directors that came out of UCLA, him and Julie Dash, and and Bill Gunn, and all of these amazing
yeah,
artists that have this ethos and this understanding of the role of art, the role of cinema, and the power of it. And so yeah, I have big love for him. I love what his son has done as well. I don't know if you've kept up. Yeah.
Oh, he's on deck to be on this podcast. Yeah,
Boom. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Marawi Garima is either next
Yeah.
week or the week after. So yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm very grateful for Hari Karima.
Yeah, me too, brother. Since just on the topic of slam, and that video that you shared from Sundance, like it really moved me to tears, brother, and it reminded me like why we do everything we do, you know. Um, I was wondering if you can share like what that movie means to you now.
Well, considering the fact that, you know, slam is primarily about, you know, the horrors and the hypocrisy within the criminal justice system in the US. And it's distinguished primarily because not only because of poetry and the fact that it introduced so much of the world to slam poetry, but also because of the discussion surrounding criminal justice, which at that time you needed to turn to, you know, certain figures like Angela Davis or, you know, other more activists than you would find in entertainment, you know. And my character goes to prison in that film because of weed, which is now legal
Mm-hmm.
in so many states, right? Um, there's so what I appreciate about that film is the sort of forecast that it provided in terms of the cultural discussions, you know, surrounding not only hip hop, because the film sounds like a mixtape, you know, like we can discuss it on that level. You know, we can discuss it in terms of who's on the soundtrack, which is wild,
Yeah.
right? Which is wild.
I have the vinyl of the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
soundtrack.
I mean,
Yeah.
they don't really do like, well, maybe now, like Black Panther brought that kind of like
Yes.
that type of soundtrack, but for the era,
Yeah.
it's crazy who's on that
Mm-hmm.
soundtrack. Um, it's crazy the topics we're able to touch on, and the realness with which we're able to do it. That we're in a real prison, that we're you know talking you know about real things involving our community, and like I said, it's I for me, who would have just as easily, you know, ended up in any film that I had been cast in. I'm grateful for having been cast in a film like that.
Yeah.
And as I say that, I'm reminded of the fact that I wasn't initially cast in that film. The director saw me at a poetry reading and tried to hire me simply as a writer.
Wow.
I was not supposed to be in it.
Hmm.
Bones Malone was supposed to play the lead role. Bones is still in the film. He plays the role of Hoffa.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But Bones Malone was supposed to play the lead role. He had a relationship with the director, Mark Levin. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember telling Mark Levin, like, I'm in school for acting. I write as a hobby. I don't know if I have the capacity to write a screenplay, but I do know that I have the capacity to be in front of that camera.
Mm-hmm.
And after, you know, a bit of time, it was agreed upon that I would play the role that I was helping to create. Um, but yeah, I remember thinking it was unfair, actually,
Mm.
because my acting role models, I'm like, you know, I decided I want to be an actor maybe after I saw Jack Nicholson in The Shining or something like that. You know what
Okay.
I'm saying? I was
Yeah.
like, you know, I don't recall you all asking Jack Nicholson to write his screenplays. I don't recall you asking Sidney Poitier to write his screenplays or Paul Robeson to write his screenplays. Or da, 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 da. Like, why do I have to write the thing? I just want to be cast. That was my mind state.
Wow. Wow.
And it's true that Jack Nicholson has written screenplays actually, and so has Sidney Poitier, and so did Paul Robeson. But
Yeah.
I was, as a fresh student then, who was only thinking of acting, I was a little surprised. So the film means a lot to me. Um, Also because we're still talking about it, but also because of the effect that it had on poetry.
Yeah. Major.
And there is a generation of poets, more than one at this point,
Mm-hmm.
um, inspired and influenced by that film, which reminded people that poetry was not simply um, a place where we celebrated the dead
Right.
and the past. And so, what I recall from that film and then from touring afterwards and what have you was the number of English teachers and professors who would show up at shows, or people who became English teachers and professors and who were like, yo, my students used to fall asleep in class. I found something to wake them up.
Mm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It's crucial. Just hearing you talk about it, like, it brings me back to to being in high school. And I went to 6 different high schools. I was somebody
Boom.
that
Oh my gosh.
I was some I was somebody that just got kicked out of school after school. Like, I remember one school I got kicked out of literally for not standing up for the flag.
Oh,
And
word? Oh, man. I
yeah,
didn't stand up for the flag. I told my kids not to stand up for the flag. I
yeah,
remember I had to write my daughter a note.
right, yeah. But that it was that film and a few other things that kind of like helped give language to what I was experiencing. Like, I was experiencing, like so many people, like, you know, what happens when the school is a pipeline to prison, and
Hello?
I was, yeah, and I remember Sonia Song's character, like, there were some things that she said in that film where, she came in and saw people's humanity. Like, I remember it's been years since I've watched that film, but I remember just feeling seen, and
Yeah.
there were some of her scenes that really moved me to tears, and it helped give
Oh,
language,
yeah.
and it
Me
helped give
too.
me hope.
Yeah. Her
So
performance is extraordinary. And I'll never, you know, there's that monologue she delivers to the actual prisoners who
that's
do a
the
little
one.
poetry reading within the film. And she's conducting a workshop. She conducted a workshop in the prison while we were shooting the film. And she
Mm,
did that because in her real life at that time, she was conducting poetry workshops at Rikers Island.
mm,
Um, and she has that line where she goes, freedom isn't out there. Freedom, pointing to her heart, she says, is in here.
mm-hmm,
Never
mm-hmm.
give anyone the power to take away your freedom. The
Yeah,
gems like that is where I'm like, okay, no, the film is, because that's all you want of a film, is for it to carry gems so that wherever or whenever someone in their life finds it, that they will be more than entertained, they will be fed,
yeah, absolutely.
you know?
Yeah, yeah. No,
And
that was.
that's the sign of a gem for me, is that, you know, whenever you encounter it, whenever you're ready in your life, we have
Mm,
no control over that. A few people saw it in cinemas,
mm-hmm,
you know? Many
mm-hmm,
people discovered it on some weird night, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna check this out. And
mm-hmm.
then we're like, oh.
Oh yeah.
and
No,
that's
I, f-
and
I
that's the
feel like
thing,
my life.
whenever you're ready.
I feel like my life changed too. What's crazy too is I remember having a book that was published of the whole screenplay.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't even know where that book is anymore. I would love to have another copy.
Yeah. It's around because I was just hanging out with the director a month ago, and he had a few copies of that book, which I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't
Mm-hmm.
seen in a minute either. It exists. It exists.
Yeah. So another thing that we lived through, and I mean, it's 9/11, right? So Slam is before, you know, 9/11
Yes.
happened, our whole world changed. The war on terror began and has never stopped, because you can't fight terrorism with terrorism.
Right.
It's such a wild idea. It doesn't make any sense. Um, and it feels like history is repeating itself right now with Gaza. And I'm seeing, and I'm sure you are too, your poem, Not in Our Name, being used again. And it feels just as relevant in 2023 as it did in 2001. I
It
was
was
hoping
2003. Yeah.
was it 2003? Wow, so
Well,
20
yeah, The
years.
Pledge to Resist is from 2003, but yeah, 9/11 is 2001, and I'll never forget 9/11 because I started writing a poem on that day.
Mm-hmm.
A poem that I worked on for 4 years, or 3 years, and that became said the shotgun to the head.
Whew.
Yeah.
Wow.
And which was a response to that.
Mm-hmm.
And the Pledge to Resist was, around that same time, was during that time period. Yeah. What's crazy about September 11th, especially in relation to the response to October 7th, and,
Mm-hmm.
that sense of, yes, we can fully mourn all innocent life loss. Without question. I lost friends and family on September 11th.
Mm.
But what I will say is that not one day did I forget or neglect to consider the role that America plays as an imperialist bully and terrorist, state-sponsored globally. Not one day did I question why or how did this happen. I knew exactly why and how. And not 1 minute did I think I could trust my government's response. Not for a second. And this is as a kid who, like you said, grew up never fucking never pledging the flag or singing an anthem. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a household where my mom told me when I was like 5 or 6, yes, I had the police talk, but I also had the talk of like, if they ever invoke a draft, we're moving to Canada.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, I grew up with more than a healthy distrust of what this nation represents and stands for, both foreign and domestic,
Mm-hmm.
And I say that with having like 6 uncles that are in the army.
Mm-hmm.
I also know that why my community is in the army was not because we were patriotic. We joined the army because it was the only way out, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
We joined the army because it's the only way to get benefits, the only way to pay for college, the only way to, be able to support and provide for a family, the only way to purchase a house, all of these things. That's how this whole system was set up.
And they prey on our community too. The army preys on us.
Of course, that's how they prey on our community, because the whole like they don't believe in socialism, so so all those socialist benefits arrive if you join the armed forces.
Right.
Then suddenly you can experience that, and Israel is crazier than that, right? Because I've been,
Yeah.
I need to be clear on the fact that I've been to Israel. I've been in the West Bank. I've been in Palestine. I've seen it. I've seen the apartheid. I've seen the signs that say Jewish only roads, right? I've spoken to the kids, both who went into the IOF and the ones who lied about their mental health or what have you to avoid it, right? And I know that every kid in Israel at the age of 17 or 18 has to go into that army and serve 2 to 3 years.
Right.
Regardless, I've been at those checkpoints and seen those teenagers with guns. I've had those guns pointed at me in Israel. I've been 20 minutes outside of Tel Aviv, in Palestine, in Benin, in the places where you're like, oh my God, the world suddenly changed. I'm in a different country. It feels the same way that's like when you drive from San Diego to Tijuana. You cross that border and you're like, holy crap. And then you realize that no one in Tel Aviv has ever been across that thing unless they did it serving time. I've seen the soldiers standing on the tanks pointing guns at the kids playing soccer. I saw kids, the first sight I saw was like, come on, you guys did this for me. I saw kids barefoot playing soccer with spent US made grenades.
Whew.
Literally. The type of thing that maybe I would try to sit back and write.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to because I just was like, okay, this is too much. This is too literal, guys.
Yes, too much.
Can we get more abstract? I don't need to see you guys playing soccer with spent grenades and see the guys pointing, these machine guns at us over this fence. Like, this is a little wild.
You're growing up in a prison. It's also a war zone. Like,
hello?
Yeah.
And those grenades had been marked illegal already by the Israeli Supreme Court, but they were being used.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And those were tear gas canisters.
Wow.
The grenade-looking tear gas.
I remember them from the protests against the WTO. They used it on us
Remember that when Ferguson happened, the Palestinian kids writing, the activists saying, hey, this is how you protect yourself from tear gas.
That's right. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And I was friends with the Palestinian activists who lived in Ferguson, who mysteriously died after the protest there.
Yeah, man. Rest in peace, Bassem. The first note of this. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying the connections to be made are real.
Mm-hmm.
The conversations to be had are crucial. I think that, we live in a place where, I'm reporting to you, live from, Chumash, Kish, and Tongva land, right?
Mm-hmm.
In California. That's where I'm speaking to you from.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm representing the modern day act of making land acknowledgements, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the discussion of the indigenous population of Israel that has been quarantined and forced to live under an apartheid occupation, I think it's crucial that we remember the same way that we are acknowledging, the land that we're on, that there needs to be acknowledgments. It's true that there has been an educational curve in the past month, right? Not everybody understood or fully recognized what happened in 1948. There were a lot of lies told. There were a lot of things hidden. One of the documentaries I had watched recently was one called Tantura, which you can find, on Prime or what have you. Tantura is something you can rent. You can find it somewhere else, and maybe you can hack it. I don't know who we're boycotting these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But Tantura.
Okay.
Of course, for those that know, for the younger crowd, they're just all the information is on TikTok.
Yeah. I feel like the young people in Palestine, in Gaza, who are documenting it for themselves is like the thing that makes this so just in your face, unavoidable. Like,
no, this is the most beautiful and necessary thing about this moment is that I don't need to hear the lies and propaganda coming from the president's mouth.
No.
Who would try to cloud the number of deaths or what have you.
Right.
When I'm literally here with Motaz and Bisan and Noor and Moab and, Priesta and all of these people. I'm like, come on now. Yeah. I see.
Yeah.
I can see.
Right.
I'm here with you. And this is, of course, the part of technology that they do everything to control that they had not considered.
Right.
I mean, just in 2018, when there was that peace march, there was that extraordinary activist. I'm blanking on his name, but you can look it up. There was a peace march in 2018 where an extraordinary Palestinian activist, along with hundreds and then thousands of other Palestinians decided to peacefully walk to the wall.
Mm.
And the IOF fired.
Wow.
Over 200 people were killed.
Mm-hmm.
Over 6,000 people were injured. There is such a crazy history. And even now, I mean, the only reason why we're talking about this, right, unfortunately, is because of the acts that occurred on October 7th, which says a lot, which is crazy. But that's the only reason why we're talking about Palestine.
At this level, with all these people. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It kind of gets to a question I was going to ask you was, so with the anti-war movements that we saw happen, when the U.S. was invading Iraq and Afghanistan, you were a part of and you saw all of that, and you're in this moment now. Are there any lessons that you think we can draw from the anti-war movements then that are applicable now? Lessons and or mistakes?
Well, I it's hard to put myself in the seat of people who trust the government in those regards,
Mm-hmm.
who look at America imperialism and wave a flag.
Right.
I don't know nothing about that really. So in terms of lessons, the lesson then was speak up.
Mm-hmm.
So at that moment of saying not in our name,
Mm-hmm.
that was the epiphany really of the moment, was to distinguish the acts of the government from the will of the people, and to make that distinction known
Mm-hmm.
to other people and to the government.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time George Bush went down,
Mm-hmm.
by the time, documentarians like Michael Moore made their, statements and all that stuff. I mean, don't forget, Michael Moore was booed when he spoke up at the academies or what have you. Like, a lot of people were not courageous. They'll act now like they were against it.
Right.
But if you look at the people booing Michael Moore when he spoke up against the president in a public forum, or Kanye, when he spoke up, the people who feigned shock, like, oh my God,
right.
How could you? I just think the lesson learned is let's not wait 20 years to acknowledge a wrong that we know is wrong when it's happening.
Right.
Let's know it and stop it, abbreviate it now. We have to shift paths. So Palestine is doing us a favor, right? When those of us who vote, for example, and if you voted like myself, I was eager to see Trump get out of office, right? So I did that Biden thing. I was like, no, I don't need to see this dude gone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I need to see that gone. And then you see this malevolent spirit cheering on death.
I know.
And I go, well, okay. And you see not just him, but you see Chuck Schumer, you see Hakeem, you know what I'm saying? You see those people standing with, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. The majority
and you see the
of
people
them
who want to quiet the progressives. I see that opening for that third party.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also see the ability that we may or may not have to pressure this, very hard-headed party into realizing that can't be their ticket. But I know that I can't vote for anybody who hasn't already said ceasefire now.
Absolutely.
If it took you this long to come to that,
We're not on the
you
same
playing
team.
games.
Yeah, we're not on the same
Genocidal game.
team.
We're not on the
Exactly.
same team. You know what I'm saying? Not at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Mm-hmm.
So all these lessons learned are like, because I remember, if you really want to get into lessons learned,
Mm.
I remember the second term of Bush.
Bruh, before you get into this is
Yeah.
wild. I was at your show in Seattle
You
talking
remember what I said?
talking shit with Ishmael in the back. It was the first time I ever met Ish and I didn't
Uh-huh.
recognize him. And it was that night. And I remember I was just fucking heated. I don't remember what you said because I was in my own feelings, just in
Yeah.
disbelief. But please remind me because I remember being at your show that night.
So that second term, right? Is that
Mm-hmm.
the one with what's his name? The guy who they say invented the internet playfully. Where they announced Homeboy won, and then they said that he didn't win.
Did they do well? Yeah, because I think in both instances, Bush won the electoral college, but not the popular vote.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm blanking on Homeboy's name.
That he ran against.
Yeah.
It wasn't Gore. It was
Yeah, it's Al Gore. It's Al Gore.
Was it Al Gore? Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I remember at the time having gone through the craziness with his first term and feeling like, and it's so crazy because I hear so many people say it now, but I remember thinking and saying it then, 20 years ago, which was that, oh, okay, we're facing white supremacy and all of these cats are coming to the surface, and it's better that we see it come out. I remember thinking, as kind of like a provocateur, like, I'm questioning whether I should even vote for Bush. Not because I like this fool at all, but because I want to see more of y'all come out of the closet and show your true faces. That's where I was then. So the lesson learned now is I would not tell anyone to vote for Trump. Ever.
No.
But I can't vote for a genocider either.
At all.
And if that splits the vote, I mean, we can be as hopeful as we want and say, oh my gosh, is this the first time we're going to see a third party candidate win? Okay, we could talk about that. Or we can be hopeful and say, oh my gosh, is the Democratic Party going to get our message and put somebody else on the ticket? And da da da. We can believe that. I don't believe it. Or we can say, I can't vote for that guy. I'm going to do this. And I know that the ramifications are going to be that the person on that ticket, who I'm not going to vote for, is going to win.
It's
horrendous decisions.
It's a hard decision, but I'm right there with you. And I think I said it publicly. I was like, anybody that, hasn't already pushed for a ceasefire right now that's an elected official does not deserve your vote.
That's true. That's true. That's where we're at.
They just don't. And I feel like they really need to, like, there needs to be some kind of justice. There needs to be some kind of accountability, and they don't deserve, like,
yeah.
They need
and
to,
so
they
then
need,
the question
they need
is,
to
what
feel
does it
this.
take to change the question? What does it take to change the country? What does it take to change the parties? What does it take to change the system? What does it take? And so, if that means for 4 years I got to fight the police, I'm used to that.
Yeah. I don't know how different this is, honestly.
The police were trained by the Israeli, forces before now.
Right. And and what they're doing
and those Israeli forces look foolish. They don't look triumphant. They look foolish and cowardly with their airstrikes and what have you. They're cowardly as hell.
And what they're doing in Cop City in Atlanta is absolutely based on what they're doing out there in Palestine. Like, it's so connected, So
Hello. And I'm from New York. I see, and I live in LA. So I see the LAPD and I see the NYPD. All of it is connected.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
All of these fools are connected. And the motto. Ain't nothing changed in those regards. It's FTP.
All day. All day, all day.
So,
All day, all
so,
day.
so, hey, what we gonna do? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So, in terms of lessons learned, no, I would not tempt the system by voting for a white supremacist, and I would not, tempt the system by voting for a white supremacist genocider. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? Like, I am, we are, that rock and hard place
Mm-hmm.
is so real.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all connected, right? Because I know you haven't gone there yet, but I'll make the connections for you, right? We want to talk about Congo. We want to talk about Sudan. We want to talk about the connections between all of these things,
That was my next question.
right?
Absolutely.
Because also that's Neptune Frost. That's what
That was
that's
also the
what
next question.
that's
Yes.
exactly what that film
Yes.
um is about, right?
Yes.
Extraction.
And people are making the
And
connections, and you've been so outspoken and consistent speaking about the Congo for all these years. So yeah, please talk about
well,
that.
I
Yeah.
mean that film is about what? It's about anti-colonialism,
Right.
decolonizing, perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
realizing that we are the technology,
Yes.
that that the realities of extraction don't even start with modern day technology. We
Mm-hmm.
got to be really clear. It's way longer than that. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I mean, here I'll make this breakdown as brief as possible. Right, the word robot comes from the Slavic language. It means slave. Robot means slave.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, um, or forced labor. So that enslaved Africans were in in a sense, they were trying to make enslaved Africans robots by cutting them off from their language, their culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just work from can't see in the morning to can't see at night. When we moved from the plantation system to the industrial age, right? They took everything that they learned from the plantation system into the industrial age. I'm talking about from hand labor to machine labor. This is why when you talk to a mechanic or engineer and they open up your car hood or your computer or in the music studio, they'll explain everything to you, your camera, they'll explain the engine to you in terms of that's the master, that's the slave, because the plantation system is built into the industrial age. It's built into the machine. That's how they understood the machine. I need this many slaves and this many overseers. I need less overseers than I need slaves. I need these parts to work and this part to control it. That's why even in computer programming, they would call it, they changed the name now, but it was initially called master slave programming 0101. That it all breaks down into what they learned from the plantation system.
Wow. That's right. I
Okay.
never even connected that, but I always heard that language for sure. Yeah.
That's what it is, bro.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. And when we talk about the Congo, we're not talking about what's happening simply right now, coltan and cobalt. Yeah. But you have to understand that the invention of the plane and the bicycle and the car is all at the same moment. It's all at the same moment. And all of those things, what they have in common is not wings, but wheels. And for those wheels to roll, they needed the discovery of this thing called rubber. And the rubber for your tires funded a genocide in the Congo
Mm.
under King Leopold of Belgium, where over
Mm-hmm.
10 million Congolese people died. Now, that is from about 1880 to
Mm-hmm.
1920. So, this is after slavery
Right.
in the United States. This is to say that Congo had already experienced another genocide beforehand with the slave trade,
Right.
right?
Right. People don't talk about the impact of the slave trade on Africa as much as they need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and the Congolese, it's very particular, right? You had the
Mm-hmm.
Soto rebellion in
Mm-hmm.
South Carolina,
Mm.
where laws were passed against bringing in any more slaves from the Congo because they were known to rebel. Look it up, the
Wow.
Soto SOTO rebellion.
Wow.
where they
Okay.
used drums to call forth other enslaved Africans and rebel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And after that, they passed a law: no more slaves from the Congo.
Wow.
So, and now people want to talk about NPCs, right? Um, that's what they had tried to make us in the plantation system. That's what the robot is.
Hmm.
That's the zero that stand next to the one in binary coding.
Right. Right.
It's that. So the connection to be made between not only, I mean, like we could talk about a lot of stuff, right? We can talk about the
Yeah.
Israeli investment in the mining trade. I mean, like, you know, you started in 1991, but I remember when I was a teenager in the late 80s,
Mm-hmm.
and my sister coming home from Fisk University and saying, "Hey, we're boycotting Coca-Cola, Reebok." Da, da, da. Why? It's like, because they're invested in South Africa.
Yeah. My mom was like, we're not getting gas from Shell no more because of South Africa.
Shell, exactly. And
I
so we
remember
were
that.
boycotting stuff
Mm-hmm.
the mid-late 80s because of apartheid then,
That's right.
right then. And
Mm-hmm.
and at that time, we were also boycotting Israel.
Mm.
We were boycotting Israel because of the fact that the only country that did not put sanctions on Israel was, I mean, on South
On South
Africa,
Africa. Yeah.
was Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And Israel had, because nobody was buying stuff from South Africa, Israel decided to be the middle person then and would sell the South African gold, would sell all of the minerals or what have you from South Africa to the world so that you could feel like you're not getting it from South Africa, you're getting it from Israel. But Israel was getting it from South Africa then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that government, and we're talking about governments, right? We're not talking about people. We need to be really
Yeah.
clear. The same way that I make the distinction of like not in our name was to say, you know, the actions of our government are not the actions necessarily of the people. And I believe that to be true about Israel as well, right? I know that there is a left wing in Israel, even though that's not the wing that is in power. I know that there have been 8 months of of um,
People have been
of
protesting there
of
too,
protesting against the government and what have
and the
you.
risks are so much higher for them. Like
The,
you
the,
get locked up for liking a post out there, and people still
exactly,
protesting. So yeah.
exactly, in this so-called, you know, democracy of the Middle East, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I know that that's very real, and I don't want to shortchange the fact that there are people speaking up there, here, and all around the world. I just want to say that apartheid is wrong anywhere,
Anywhere.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's wrong here in America.
Mm-hmm.
It's wrong anywhere. And once again, we ain't free until everybody's free. That's how
Absolutely.
it works,
Absolutely.
you know? And that
Yeah.
goes for, you know, the gender discussion.
Yes.
That goes for race discussion, religion discussion, right? That
Absolutely.
goes for all of these discussions. We are not free until everyone is. And so still, you know, freestyling on your question of what was learned. What was,
Off the lessons, yeah,
yeah.
of back then. I know
Yeah.
it's so much, it's so many. I mean, on the topic of Martyr Luther King
Yeah.
and Neptune Frost, and even the dance performance that I saw you do in Seattle, I think earlier this
Yeah,
year.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you've been. I love this whole project because it's like many different sides of one story. Yeah, that you've been telling across many different mediums now for years, you know, and you've been so consistent with the messaging about, you know, we are the technology, and I remember you saying that, like, you know,
Yeah.
you're not impressed by technology that's based on analog oppression, you know.
Right. Exactly. Modern
it's
day
so real.
technology, digital technology is based on analog exploitation. It
Yeah,
has been and it is.
can you kind of break down like where this story for Martin Luther King started that you've been telling across all these different mediums? Like
Of
where did
course.
it start from
Really
you?
easy.
And
It's really,
yeah.
really easy. So um my wife Anisia and I, and we're the co-directors of Neptune Frost, right?
Mm-hmm.
we were working together as actors in a film that was shot in Senegal called Aujourd'hui. And the director of this film, a Senegalese director named Alain Gomis, he's the dude that introduced us, right? And we were shooting the film in Senegal, and this is in 2010.
Okay.
I want to say. And while we were there, we learned about Colton. Well, it starts like this. I saw a kid after school in Dakar, Senegal, one day, right? And he had on Beats headphones. He had a smartphone, and he was sitting in front of his house building a drum. And because the drum culture, Samba, the community, like dance and drum competitions are very much a part of Senegalese culture to this day, right? Very playfully, like drum will start playing and everybody comes to where it's coming from and the drummers are there and the dancers, and it's kind of a competition between the drummers and the dancers. It's like the drummers versus the dancers, and the drummers are there like, and the drummers are and the dancers are catching every stop and every break, and like it's like, oh, whoever does it best, like, you know, who can, you know, psych somebody out. Are the drummers going to psych out the dancers? Are the dancers going to psych out the drummers? All this type of stuff. So I saw a teenager after school building a drum with a smartphone and Beats headphones, you know, which is to say the most modern technology of the time, and this ancient technology of the drum. And it was at that moment that I had the epiphany of, like, actually, the drum is the first form of wireless communication.
Yeah.
And that epiphany brought on the discussion where someone had said, well, yeah, you know, because we were in this market. We went to this market in Dakar, and we saw computer parts for sale, like motherboards and all this stuff. And someone had pointed out that, like, well, you know, you've seen the e-waste camps. I had no idea what an e-waste camp was. I looked online and I realized that there are village-sized places where our tech goes to die. Because, you know, the new iPhone or the new whatever comes out and you want to get the new one, so you jet your old one. And those old computer parts are all brought to these places where people still take the time to take them apart, to pull apart the platinum, the uranium, the things that are still usable within these devices, these old devices. And so there are village-sized areas on the continent in China where you'll see and it's all set up, right? You'll see piles of motherboards and piles of wires and piles of monitors and piles of, you know, like all this stuff. Keyboards and all this type of stuff. And I learned about that, the e-waste camps, at the same time that I learned about coltan and cobalt.
Wow.
And learned that, in fact, a lot of these mines were close to these e-waste camps, so that the planes from wherever that were coming in with the e-waste were going out with the minerals and resources to make more tech. And from there, that opened a can of worms in terms of just learning and unpacking information about how modern day tech is made.
Yeah.
And so that's one part of the story. The other part of the story is that, so Anisia is from Rwanda, and the other thing was that through her, I had met a number of people who in Rwanda and from Rwanda who were either survivors of 1994, the genocide against the Tutsi, or were kids who had been kids. They were young adults, but they were all of a certain age who had, in many cases, been orphaned by.
Right.
And as an American, in all my ignorance initially, I would ask stupid questions like,
Yeah.
What are you, this or that? And they'd be like, oh no, we don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, since then I spent a lot of time in Rwanda,
Mm-hmm.
and the way in which, from the government down to the schools, to the people, the way in which that society moved from that horrendous moment and grew and shared testimony and all this stuff. I understood that as a technology too, as a technology of awareness that unfortunately really came about because of a horrendous act. To me, if I were to use an analogy, that on the piano, you have the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, mi, mi. That black key is a shock. It doesn't have the same incremental space as the other keys do. We go sharp, natural, flat, blah, blah, blah. When we go into those black keys and take those incremental steps, some philosophers define that as kind of like an external shock. Like, why are we not taking the mathematical step in the same way that we've been taking up into that point? Does it take an external force to shift us into a different layer of approach? The external shock or internal shock of that horrendous tragedy, which is very much reality in Rwanda, everybody that I met from there kind of enlightened me with a way of looking at the world and society, because when half of a country turns against the other half, and you don't finish it by simply because you can't put half of a country in prison, how do you deal with that? How do you grow from that? How do you heal from that? And so I began to observe and learn and appreciate some of the conversations and observations there also as a way of technology, as a sort of technology of consciousness and awareness. And that connects Neptune Frost in that everyone in Neptune Frost, the cast and crew of that film are all Rwandan and Burundian artists. And so it's kind of, in many ways, it's very specific who we made this film with, as specific as it is of what we made this film about.
Right.
Technology and a kind of technology.
Right.
For me, in terms of my observation of it as an outsider and being just impressed and grateful for being welcomed into ongoing kind of conversation. And so what am I saying? I guess it's that the idea for that film and story, because it's a graphic novel as well. The graphic novel was just completed a few months ago.
I was wondering.
And so it'll probably come out in like a year.
So we got album. We've got film.
Yeah, more than one album. Yeah,
more than one album. Film.
Yeah, you have Martin Luther King. You have Encrypted and Vulnerable, and then you have the soundtrack of the film Unanimous Goldmine. So you have 3 albums. You have the film. You saw the Bill T. Jones Motherboard Suite, which surrounds the music with the dancers, and then the graphic novel, which was the first
amazing
idea, along with it being a musical.
I love it.
It's the longest. to execute.
That transmedia storytelling. I know how much work that is. We tried a transmedia storytelling project back in 2012. I don't know if you ever caught wind of the Copper Wire record. We did, but
Okay.
it was an Ethiopian hip hop space opera I did with my cousin McClee
Yes.
and my brother Elias. And yeah, same thing. We were going for the graphic novel, the album, the short story. Nnedi Okorafor wrote the liner notes, and
Yes.
it was a whole thing that we tried to do, but
Exactly.
it is a lot of work. Like, my God.
It is a lot of work. For me, what I saw it as was a way to combine all of these varied disciplines and interests, so that I saw it as kind of waste management in a sense, in that, if I'm working on music, a poem that is not necessarily to be associated with music may arise. But having this multimedia project allowed me to take any aspect of what was created and find its place in the wheel, in the spectrum of this story, and the reading that I was doing and all of this stuff, it all connected. And of course, it's so connected to technology, to the timeline that I'm browsing and all of these things. So everything, it was a way of connecting everything. And it is a way of kind of economizing perspective, but even in the way that I was talking about with like what I was learning through spending time in Rwanda and with Anisia, and what I was learning about technology and looking forward and back, right? Because we can put it in real simple terms, right? Like, people be like, "Oh, I can't start my day without coffee." Oh, that's great. Where's the coffee come from?
Right.
People be like, "Oh, I love chocolate. I'm a chocoholic." Oh, that's great.
Where's that come
Where's
from?
the chocolate come from? But when like you get married and it's like, "Oh, I got this diamond." Da, da. What I'm here to tell you is that the chocolate, the coffee, the rubber, the diamond, the coltan, the cobalt, they all come from the same place. The same people. And those same people were also the same people that were enslaved, that we are descendants of. So in the context of a rape of a land, and all this, and so because all this is actually like what I'm talking about is climate justice.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
How it connects to imperialism, how it connects to capitalism, how it connects to, white supremacy, how it connects to patriarchy.
Yeah.
These are the connections to be made. This is, if we want a new Green Deal, we have to look at all of this and go, okay, I am dependent on a number of things that come from a particular place. Where indigenous peoples, because you might be like, well, I get my coffee from Honduras. I like my coffee from Guatemala. I will repeat, where indigenous peoples
right. Absolutely
are exploited through their relationship to the land, and that land ownership's relationship to the capitalist system that controls our government and what have you.
That's it right there. That's
What is it? Let's have some coffee.
Yeah. Like, I feel like it's our role. Like, it's our role as artists to really like shine a light on these things and make the connections for people where they don't see those connections. So once you see it, you can't unsee it,
You can't unsee it, but you don't know
what are you going to do about it?
Right?
Yeah, what are you going to do about it?
To do with it. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot of information.
You got to wrestle with it, though. You have to,
And so that wrestling with it is for me, it's like, it may not even be in the text of an album. You know what I'm saying? It might be in how the beat itself is programmed.
Right.
To symbolize that.
Right.
I just want you to feel it.
Yes,
so that when you hear it, you'll recognize it and go, "Oh, that sounds like, I don't know, it's familiar." There's lots of approaches, but it's better to know.
Absolutely.
It's better to know. It's better to know.
Because
And
how else are we
yeah,
gonna stop it? You know, how else are we gonna stop
yeah.
it if we don't know? If we don't, if you know, if we
And
don't
maybe
see
we
it,
can
you
be
know?
clear on the fact that maybe we're not going to stop it.
Right,
Maybe we're not going to stop it. Maybe we're just going to shift it as it's happening so that it can happen in a more just way. Like,
right.
we're not going to stop the evolution of humanity no more so than we can stop the evolution of consciousness or technology as a reflection of consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you see, when we use technology to share information that expands our spirits and understanding of the world, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
When they use surveillance to stop us from expanding our spirits in the world, that's another, right?
Right.
But it's the same technology.
Mm-hmm.
It's what spirit we put into it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there's a beautiful book, Algorithms of Oppression,
Mm.
right? I believe the author's name is Sophia Noble. But
Okay.
Algorithms of Oppression is the name of the book. There's so many, Ruth Benjamin, there's so many uh, you know, activists and academics and scholars, from Sylvia Wynter to on to infinity of people who are talking about the connections between these worlds. And Angela Davis has been here all along. So many people have been
Absolutely.
here all along, making these connections and living these connections. Um, and yes, it's all connected from the performance of gender to the performance of race to the construct, like all these things are there.
Yeah.
And yes, it may be a lot, but it's nothing to be intimidated by.
Mm.
you know it's I was having a conversation yesterday where we were talking about how, like, learning the truth of the land that you stand on as an American, like who lived here before, you
Mm-hmm.
know, even if
Mm-hmm.
it's just for the sake of like being able to acknowledge that,
Yeah.
whether internally or vocally or what have you. And I also thought of that because we had gone to a Jewish Voices for Peace rally.
Mm-hmm. Where they shut down Hollywood Boulevard, that one?
Yeah, we were
Yeah.
there, and I missed the beginning of it, right? And I had questions. I was like, I wonder if they started it with a land acknowledgement.
Mm-hmm.
I just want, I was
Just
thinking
wanted,
about
just wanted to know. Yeah.
the connections between that, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
because what they're speaking up for in real time in Palestine is
It's
land
indigenous people.
acknowledgement,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Um, People acknowledgement, right? So I was just thinking about that, and then I was like, but when you raise those questions, you have to go, well, wait, who was in Hollywood, right? So you
Right.
go, oh, okay, it's the Tongva and the Quiche, okay. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, learning that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, wherever you are in this country is probably the same energy you put into like learning and using they them pronouns for your people that, ask that of you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know?
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's just all this beautiful like wonder wheel of growth and learning to be embraced, and that's it. But
Yeah.
simultaneously it is a sort of fight that we wage against those in power to recognize our power. I mean, this is an interesting moment, right? Because of the fact that in this moment, those of us who want to see ceasefire, who want a free Palestine, in fact, we are not a minority.
I know.
We are a majority.
Right.
What
Right.
is frustrating about this moment is that as a majority, we are not able to convince the government minority that represents us to speak up for us.
Right. Right.
That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. It says a lot. It says a lot about what this country really is. You know, it lifts up the veil on everything. I feel like,
And that's many countries.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just America. It's
Yeah.
across Europe. I mean, it's across the Middle East too. You know,
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
know
It's a
it's global.
global movement. Absolutely.
It's global. And so, yeah. And so, anyway,
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, brother. I always ask people this one last question. What's one thing you hope everyone gets from your art and the work you're doing?
Me.
Mm.
That's it. You
That's
know?
the, that's the
Yeah, because
simplest
at the end
that's
of
the
the day,
simplest answer I ever got for that question.
well, that's the most beautiful thing as someone who writes poetry or makes music or as an artist, but you never really, really have to be concerned about sounding or coming off like another.
Mm-hmm.
Like your fingerprint is your own,
Right.
That's how they got you, right? They got your fingerprint. They recognize you. They know who you are because of your fingerprint. Nobody else has that fingerprint. There's no two in the world with
Mm-hmm.
that. So trust it, right?
Mm.
And so that, and it's not to say that that uniqueness is so unique, you know, like we are connected to each other in millions of ways, and it's beautiful and necessary,
Right.
right? And so the one thing that anyone should get from my expression is the thing that makes it mine. And that's a unique instance of all of the things that have combined to make me me. And that's the loves, the fears, the doubts, the concerns, the things that excite me, the things that taste good, the things that I'm allergic to or just don't like, the things that, all of those things. It's just that.
Yeah.
And it'll come and go, right? I'm not here forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, what do you get from Nina Simone? You get her.
100%.
And it's only her,
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're like, thank you, Nina Simone, for
That.
being you in a lifetime, in your lifetime. I
Yo.
needed you to be you because it feeds me now.
That's right. That's
Boom.
right. Well, yo, Saul, you feed me so much. Going back to the very beginning of this conversation when we first met back in the day, somehow I got your email address way back in the day. I don't even remember what I sent you, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it might have been a poem. I might have told you about some music. I don't know what I said to you, but I remember you said to me, "Now take it to the next level." And that sentence is something I've always remembered throughout my whole life. And I've watched you over the last 20 plus years continue to take it to the next level again and again and again. So thank you so much for your work, your friendship, being so grounded, down to earth, making this time, sharing your stories, and really being fully you. We appreciate you
Love you,
so much.
brother, and love
Love you
to
too.
everybody who takes the time to listen to this, and forgive me for any oversights or anything I neglected to say or forgot to add or shouldn't have said or blah 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 blah.
You're good.
I'm just working on the moment, and this is a moment when genocide in Palestine is actually being live streamed into our homes in
Right.
real time, and we're making sense of it and trying to boost Palestinian voices, and that's all really.
Yeah.
Like that's we need this to stop, and so that's that.
I want to thank my friend, the legend, Saul Williams, for joining me today on the Worldwide Underground. You can follow Saul Williams on Instagram or his official website, saulwilliams.com. And while you're there online, be sure to check out the PalestineAcademy.com. That's a great resource, a great education hub for social media, Palestine awareness. They've got links on different people's accounts to follow. Also want to shout out Palestinian Youth Movement, Jewish Voice for Peace, If Not Now.org. Those are all Instagram accounts you can follow to get involved with different actions, demonstrations, protests happening around your city. It is still all hands on deck. All of us together raising our voices for a ceasefire, for an end to the apartheid state, and for a free Palestine. Appreciate y'all listening to this episode. I'll be back next week right here on the Worldwide Underground. Love to everyone who subscribes on Substack. The best way to support storytelling in this format is right there. GabrielTeodros.substack.com. Be back with you soon. Much love. Peace.